Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. I want to chat a bit today about vanished kingdoms. And I am at my sister's today, and there is weird light, so I don't know that this is showing up. It looks like it is not. Maybe that's a little bit better. This is one of those electronic editions that does not have a cover once you open it up. So this is actually just a picture of the cover that I saw, that I see in my library, my Kindle library. When you actually open up the book, it's not there, and that is one of my pet peeves that I have with certain publishers, in this case Viking, that sometimes sell their electronic editions a little bit short. So the subtitle of this is called The Rise and Fall of States and Nations, and it's by Norman Davies. This was published in 2012 in the U.S., and it was published, I think, in 2011 in the UK, and it was published originally under a different title. I originally found this book under a different title. It was something about Forgotten Kingdoms of Europe or something. But this American edition that I read, the subtitle is The Rise and Fall of States and Nations. So it was really, an interesting book. I've had it on my reading, want to read list for a couple of years now, and I decided to go ahead and get it read this year by putting it on my, my 2017 must-read TBR, and I'm just now getting around to reading it. And it was, it was really interesting. It's set up in chapters. Each chapter actually goes over a particular kingdom that no longer exists, and so I'll just kind of run through which ones they are. They're not always really recognizable to an average person today, not to me anyway. The first one that is discussed is Tolosa, and this was a Visigothic kingdom that existed from the year around 418 to 507 AD, and this is in the area of France, kind of the Aquitaine. And one of the interesting things is Tolosa is Toulouse. The French city today is known as Toulouse. The second chapter is about Alt-Clud, and this is Kingdom of the Rock. This is Dumbarton Rock in Scotland. This is near Glasgow. This was a kingdom that existed from the 5th through the 12th centuries. And then number 3, chapter 3, was Burgundia. Existed from about 411 to 1795, and it was a whole series of kingdoms. And that's one point to make, is that the author starts us out when it can be said that this kingdom started, and it often morphs into something completely almost different by the time we finish with that chapter. And this was definitely the case of Burgundia, which covers kind of the area now of Switzerland, parts of France, parts of Italy, but this kingdom of Burgundia. Anyway, chapter 4 was Aragon, the kingdom of Aragon. I think I'm familiar with it through Catherine of Aragon, who was one of the wives of Henry VIII, obviously, but then also King Ferdinand, and then Queen Isabella of Spain. King Ferdinand was from Aragon, and then Queen Isabella was from Castile, and it unified sort of Spain. Their monarchy did, but that kingdom existed all the way up until 1714 in one form or another. Chapter 5, Litva. This is from the years 1253 to 1795. This is Litva is kind of Belarus and Lithuania and Poland, and they interacted with each other in different ways for several hundred years, obviously, but that kingdom ended in 1795. Chapter 6 is Byzantion, which is Byzantium, existed from 330 AD to 1453, so well over 1,000 years. This was the continuation of the Roman Empire in the East. Constantinople, the Eastern Empire. When the Western Roman Empire ended, the Eastern Roman Empire continued on then for many, many centuries. Then chapter 7 is Borussia. And this is the kingdom of Prussia. Eventually became the kingdom of Prussia. And I had actually been curious really about, what was Prussia? How did it come about? What happened to it? And this chapter gives us an overview of Prussia and explains, what happened to it. That kingdom existed from 1230 AD till 1945, so the end of World War II. And then chapter 8 is Sabaudia. This existed from 1033 to 1946. I don't exactly remember where Sabaudia was located, actually. It's not coming to me right now. But anyway, that kingdom existed from 1033 to 1946. Then we have chapter 9, Galicia. This is kind of Ukraine-Poland area. Existed from 1773 to 1918. Chapter 10 is Etruria. This was a kingdom in northern Italy, including Florence, that existed from 1801 to 1814. This kingdom was born from the Napoleon era, but it ended in 1814. Chapter 11 is Rosenau. This is a kingdom in Germany. It existed from 1826 to 1918. The interesting thing about Rosenau is it is Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Prince Albert, who married Queen Victoria, was a prince of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, and I did not realize this, but the House of Windsor, Queen Victoria's descendants, actually in 1918, because of the end of World War I, and the anti-German sentiment of the time, by proclamation they changed their name from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to Windsor. Much more English-sounding name. That was done by proclamation. It's apparently completely made up. Anyway, chapter 12 is Tsernagora, and exists from 1910 to 1918. This is a small kingdom in the Balkans. It is now Montenegro, and it was the area of Montenegro. Then chapter 13 was Rusyn, and this is called the Republic of One Day. This is the Ruthenians, are the people. They live in an area called Carpatha, Ukraine, and this is now it's part of Ukraine. But at the time, this existed on March 15th, 1939. When Hitler marched into Czechoslovakia, it sort of threw the sections of Czechoslovakia into chaos. The Slovakia part declared independence, and so did this republic, but it only lasted for one day, and I believe it was the Germans that came in and took over that after one day. So anyway, chapter 14 is Eire, Ireland. That was a kingdom that was a kingdom, and then it was incorporated. It has a very long history. It was incorporated into the British Empire, but then it has freed itself from that connection over the course of the 20th century and is now a republic. And then chapter 15 is CCCP, which is the Cyrillic alphabet for the USSR. It existed from 1924 to 1991. And then finally, the last chapter is a brief kind of overview about how states die. So I know that was kind of a lot to go through, but I really wanted to kind of touch base on just the wide diversity of kingdoms that he exposes us to in this book, and it was really interesting from that perspective. They're not related to each other, so you jump from chapter to chapter. You may be in one chapter, you may be, with the Burgundians, and then the next thing you know, you're in the 20th century. So it does kind of, I guess, order. It goes, the chapters kind of tell that whole story. So like I said about Prussia, this was really interesting for me to sort of get an overview of Prussia. Also Lithuania. At the end, we talked about Estonia, and Estonia, how that came about, and that was under the chapter of the USSR, kind of focuses on Estonia and Russia. So, really interesting from that standpoint to me, who loves history. And I love this kind of history. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to read this book of, forgotten sort of. It really impacted how things are today, but it is no more. And then so that's really kind of one of my main thoughts that I took away from it was how nothing really lasts, including governments. I think that human lifespan is like 80 years old, and so from our perspective in our life, things seem pretty stable, and we may think there's always going to be the way things are now. There may always be a United States that looks like it does today. But if you really stop and think about it, it's not. It's only looked this way, the way it is today, exactly since the 50s when Hawaii and Alaska joined as states. And then, it may not always be around. In 1,000 years, I think the world, the nation-state system of the world, even if we still have nation-states, it would look very different. And it's just a constant movement and change, and that is really what history is about, and that's really one of the reasons why I love studying history. And then, the author here is kind of a kindred spirit for me, because the book was dedicated for those whom historians tend to forget. And, I think that I love that quote because, again, it's this forgotten history that I love investigating, and these little sort of details of history that often get swept away in sort of a grand narrative, because historians need to put together information for readers to get a narrative of how, to tell a story of the past. And so a lot of times something as small as maybe this one-day republic that was part of Czechoslovakia in 1939 and now is part of Ukraine, it's not really relevant to the big story. So as a detail, it might get left out just for convenience sake. And this book, sort of looks at history like France, for example, when we're talking about Burgundia, have a completely different view, because this is France before France existed. And the same thing for Haute-Cleude, Scotland. So it's in Scotland before Scotland actually existed. The Scotland that we know today did not exist in any form whatsoever, neither did England. So, to me, this is really interesting, and this is really what I took away from the book. Just things change, don't they? Nothing is ever going to stay the same. So if you don't like a current political situation or a current political regime, I think you can rest pretty assured that it won't last forever. So on that note, I think I will leave it at that. I will have more book chats and such coming up in the near future, so stay tuned. Thanks. Bye.